Assalamu alaikum, this is Dr. Mona Al-Idrisi, author of the Muslim Narcissist book. In today's podcast, I'll be speaking about the Muslim women who have fueled the reappearance of toxic pre-Islamic patriarchal societies. I have already spoken about pre-Islamic Jahiliyyah societies that were patriarchal in a very toxic way. So if you haven't had that podcast, please listen to that one first. So again, this one makes sense. So I am recording podcasts in a sequel so that everything makes sense. Everything that you listen to ties in together. So I'm just taking a moment again to kindly remind you to please share this channel with other people who you may feel will benefit from the information I provide, and to like and subscribe because I've got so much more information coming, inshallah, about lots of different subjects that affect our ummah as a whole and affect our families and ourselves as people and how we develop as Muslims in the modern world. So this is going to be quite a heavy podcast today. There's lots of information that I will bring to the surface as always, and inshallah this will shed a lot of light on the problematic societies and families that we find ourselves in at the moment. So some people may ask, how can women contribute to a red pill movement, a toxic masculine movement, a toxic patriarchal movement? Why are women fueling the re-establishment of problematic societies that are run by problematic men? Very, very problematic men. So I'm going to keep this within the context of Muslim societies and the ummah as a whole, because I'm seeing a lot of women come out at the moment and they are fueling a very problematic view of Islam that supports the red pill movement. It supports narcissistic men and their mission in societies. And so before I move on to speaking about these different types of women, I just wanted to touch upon the difference between healthy masculinity and toxic masculinity. And it's important that this is defined because we already have an understanding of it in Islam. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, الرجال قوامون على النساء. Okay, so we know that men are the caretakers of women. We know that men are the leaders of society. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has equipped them with features that allow them to be the leaders of our societies and the leaders of our families, because they have the mental capacity to do it, they've got the physical capacity to do it, and they also have the protective element in them. So, we hear this a lot. If a war was to break out, or if someone had broken into the house, it would be the man in the house who we would turn to for that protection. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has equipped men with that level of bravery in order to combat certain problems in life and enemies and so on and so forth. Now, this is not a birthright. It's very important to note that not every man is born with this. Just because a woman has given birth to a boy does not mean that he is automatically al-Qawwam. Al-Qawwam is someone who was raised to be al-Qawwam. There are life skills that he learns, there are emotional skills that he learns, and he learns how to invest his emotional strength and his intelligence in the right channels in order to have the position of al-Qawwam. Because it's not given to just anybody. It's not something that men are automatically respected for. If you do not have the qualities of being al-Qawwam, you cannot be a leader. You cannot be a leader of society, and you cannot be a leader of women. And I say this because if that was the case, our societies would be a complete mess. If men did not know the true meaning of being al-Qawwamun. So al-Qawwam is someone who is a protector, a leader, and a provider. Now, in order to be a leader, not only do you have to be strong in mindset and strong in your iman, because you've got to enable justice, okay? You've got to encourage justice. You cannot be an oppressor. You cannot be someone who lacks knowledge and lacks intelligence. You cannot be someone who lacks emotional intelligence, because fools are the worst people to have as leaders. If you have a fool or a clown as a leader, the entire group, the entire society, the entire family will break down. You cannot put a fool as a leader. The person who is a leader is always someone who is highly intelligent because of the knowledge they have, emotionally intelligent because they understand how people operate, they understand people's behavior, they understand how to deal with people. Like, knowing how to deal with different types of people is a very strong trait of a leader. And then add to that it is the foundation actually of having both a fear and a love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you do not have that fear and love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you will never be able to lead properly and with justice. You won't be able to do it. So apply this to families, apply this to the grand scheme of things, world leaders and presidents and so on. So this is what healthy masculinity is. Healthy masculinity is the investment of emotional intelligence, knowledge, intellect, physical strength, and iman in the right channels. You're doing it in the right way. You're channeling it properly. And again, I keep saying this. This is why people were nominated to be leaders. You didn't choose to be a leader. You were nominated because people will admire your character. They would admire this particular man in society, and they would all say, because he's just, because he's fair, because he's strong and fearless and brave, because he has this love and fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he doesn't want to be accountable for misleading, misguiding, oppressing so many people. He doesn't want that on the Day of Judgment. He is someone we want as our leader. So leaders used to be nominated by public vote. And that's how Al-Khulafa Ar-Rashideen came into power. They came into power not because they nominated themselves, but because they were chosen by the people, because they felt safe under the leadership of them. They felt safe under their leadership. So the element of safety is extremely important when it comes to masculine leadership and healthy masculinity. You need to feel safe under the authority of these people. And I'm talking mainly about women and children. So if women felt safe under the authority of a specific person, then this person was healthy in his masculinity. He was healthy. A prime example is Umar ibn Khattab. He was so powerful. He was so aggressive against tyrants and enemies, and that people felt safe because he was someone who enabled justice, and he gave everyone their rights. He ensured that everyone had their rights. He didn't oppress anybody. So this is what healthy masculinity is. Now, toxic masculinity is the opposite. Toxic masculinity is when men want to come into power, but they do not have emotional intelligence. They lack a lot of knowledge. They use religion. And I'm talking about Muslims here. They use religion to their advantage. They justify all of their crimes and abuse and horrible behaviours and frauds and deceptions and everything with Islamic texts, using ahadith and Quranic verses taken out of context and completely misinterpreted. They will use those. They will also oppress others, and they will do whatever it takes to hold that position of power all the time, even when they're not entitled to it. You're not qualified for it. You don't have that connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't have a fear or a love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're just operating, you're ruling from your ego. When you rule from your ego, everything breaks down. Everything breaks down and you become unbearable to follow as a man. Unbearable. No one wants to follow you. Now, with toxic masculinity, respect is enforced upon people. Whereas with healthy masculinity, people will respect those men naturally. So if you're healthy in your masculinity and you are... Because masculinity is a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing when it's exercised in the right way. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He gave men, specific traits in order to be, masculine in a healthy way, it makes them amazing men. It makes them powerful, but not in a tyrannical way. It makes them powerful in a way that makes women admire them. That makes other people admire them, not just women, men as well. You really look up to certain types of men because they're just so powerful in how they don't need to demand respect. They get the respect because people love them, admire them, and look up to them. However, with toxic masculinity, those men demand respect because those people do not respect them originally, and now they have to enforce power and enforce authority. And they will be investing all of their traits in the wrong way. For example, they'll be gym rats. They'll always be in the gym. They'll pump up, they'll bodybuild, they'll look all muscly and powerful and everything, but they've got no emotional intelligence, and it just makes them look really silly. Because when they have conflicts and emotional problems to deal with, they go back to being a 5-year-old, the man-child. But on the outside, he looks like a big, macho, muscly man. He's not understanding that looking like a macho man doesn't make you masculine. What makes you masculine is your ability to, exercise your leadership in a healthy way and to restrain your toxic traits, restrain your ego, restrain your qareen. This is what makes a man a healthy, masculine man. If you cannot restrain your qareen, if you cannot restrain your anger, al-hakimu 'inda al-ghadab. Prophet Muhammad said, the wisdom comes out when you're angry, when your toxic traits come out, because the person who is unhealthy in his masculinity, he will act in a very toxic way upon that anger, upon that rage, upon that grief. They're the ones who lash out and scream and start a fight in the street, and they do all sorts of things like that. But someone who experiences anger and uses his wisdom at that moment in time, he becomes al-hakim. He is now a wise man because he's managed to restrain 3 things at the same time: his emotions, his nafs, and his qareen. All 3 of them. That's a powerful man. It's not just men, it's women too. But here I'm talking about, men who we want to be our leaders. The men who should be the leaders of our societies. They don't spit venom when they talk. They're not aggressive. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told the Prophet Muhammad, when you speak to people, even if it's people you don't like, even if it's your own enemies, speak to them in a kind way, in a gentle way, because when you're aggressive, it doesn't give a good impression about the peace that Islam gives you. If Islam continues to make you an angry person, it continues to make you an aggressive person, the iman is not present in your heart. If we look at Surah Al-Imran, ayah 159, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu فَبِمَا رَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَضًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ لَانفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ فَاعْفُ عَنْهُمْ وَاسْتَغْفِرْ لَهُمْ وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ فَإِذَا عَزَمْتَ فَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُتَوَكِّلِينَ. So the translation of this ayah is, and if you had been rude and harsh in speech and harsh in your heart towards, the enemies and people who you are trying to draw into Islam, they would have abandoned you. So pardon them instead and ask forgiveness for them and consult them in the matter. And when you have decided, then rely upon Allah. Indeed, Allah loves those who rely upon Him. So even when it comes to speaking to the enemy, we are requested to speak in a way that's not rude and not harsh. We're not supposed to scream and shout and hurl verbal abuse. We're not supposed to do any of that. But those people who are in their toxic masculinity will do that. They're not just rude to their enemies, they're rude to their own people. They're rude to their own brothers and sisters. They're rude to their parents. And they're rude to their wives and their children and, just other Muslims in general. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has asked the Prophet Muhammad to be kind to the enemies, then imagine how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala views those who speak harshly to their parents and speak harshly to those who are a part of their own society. So I just wanted to differentiate that, because if you look at red pill men, Muslim men in our societies, I know I've spoken about this before, but it's just a quick, reminder. If you look at their YouTube channels and the way that they speak about marriages and speak about relationships and speak about the deen, it's always harsh and it's aggressive and it doesn't make you feel comfortable, because they are in their toxic masculinity. They're not in the full, complete role of being al-qawwam, in a state of healthy masculinity that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intended for men to be. So if you are not raised to have that healthy masculinity, you can't be a leader and you can't be respected. you won't be respected. You won't ever be respected. And that's why narcissists have trouble gaining the respect of people naturally, because narcissists always demand respect. They always demand that people listen to them and obey them and submit to them when they give no people a real reason to. And if people do submit to them and obey them, it's usually out of fear, and it's usually out of them being trauma bonded to that narcissist. So, for example, if a red pill Muslim man is talking about, how women are so terrible, how wives need to be disciplined, how this and that, then those men who have been through that trauma will bond with that person, and they will relate to that narcissist, and they will continue being influenced by that narcissist. And what happens here is that those red pill influencers influence the next generation of men not being in their healthy masculinity. So instead of them healing, they now get fueled. They get fueled in their toxic ideologies about the world, about Islam, about women, and all of that. So now that I've differentiated the two, I want to go on to the women. The types of women who have fueled the red pill movement, who have fueled misogyny, who have fueled the rise of toxic Muslim men, who come across as being really narcissistic. Why are there some women who support them? It's very strange, but there are. Now, there are two types of women who support them, two types of Muslim women. The first type is the narcissistic Muslim woman, and she does it intentionally. She supports the red pill movement intentionally. And then you have the second type of Muslim woman, who is the codependent. The codependent Muslim woman, who is on the higher level of codependency, very heavy codependency. She will support the red pill movement in the ummah, but unintentionally. So let me start off with explaining the narcissistic Muslim woman. So this woman is the mother who has been raised in an environment in which there are already misogynistic Muslim men. So she may have been raised by, a very difficult father, a difficult brother. She may have been in a very toxic environment, and she was raised to understand that men are much more superior than women in Islam. So I'm going to break this down as well. So you've got two types of narcissistic Muslim women here. The ones who were raised this way, and the ones who later found a problematic understanding of Islam later on in life. Okay, I'll come on to that. So if we start with the woman who was raised in a problematic way, more often than not, she would have been raised by a very codependent or narcissistic mother as well. And this narcissistic mother would have preferred the boys over the girls. Now, when a narcissistic mother prefers boys over girls, it automatically creates a relationship dynamic in the family that puts boys on a pedestal without them having to do anything. They haven't earned any respect. They haven't done anything remotely impressive to make them so special. So misogynistic Muslim fathers will automatically prefer boys anyway, but when it comes from the woman, when it comes from the mother, it can be very painful for young girls to experience that, and to experience an upbringing in which they were not favoured as much as their brothers. So when a mother gives birth to a boy, and that's celebrated, again, we see that a lot in Asian societies, Arab societies, until now, that Bedouin mindset is still there, that if you have a boy, or if you give birth to sons, a woman is, praised, and she's congratulated more than if she was to give birth to a girl. And a man would be more proud to tell people that, my wife has given birth to a boy. That boy is automatically given a golden child treatment just because he's a boy. It doesn't matter what the girls do in the family, it will never measure up to him purely just being a boy. And this is something taken from Jahiliyyah, right? Pre-Islamic Arabia, because they used to favour the boys over the girls. The boys had more economic benefits, and girls who were born, especially if they came from lower to middle class families, they were seen as a liability. And they used to bury baby girls alive back then because the boys were more important. And they used to keep a certain number of baby girls at the time who would be beneficial in marriage and so on and so forth. So this is something that we still witness today. There are still many people being raised in families in which they have to watch their brothers get away with everything, get away with the same mistakes that the girls make. Now, we know in Islam that sins, men and women are accountable for their sins in equal measure. There is no, boys will not be accountable like girls and girls will not be accountable like boys. No, all sins, all major sins, all mistakes, they are to be accountable for equally. Now, we know that children under the age of puberty, they're not going to be punished for their sins by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're not going to be punished for their mistakes. So it's up to the parent to discipline them equally and fairly. And here, this is where a lot of childhood traumas start for girls because, like I said, they're raised to believe that boys are better. They're raised to believe that girls serve the boys. I mean, I grew up seeing loads of examples where the girls were taught to serve their brothers. To make dinner for them, make breakfast for them, make tea for them, make their beds for them, clean after them. The girls were raised with that mindset that you are raised to serve your brothers, you're raised to serve your father, and when you're older, you need to serve your husband. So narcissistic Muslim mothers will push for this. They will push for this because the boys are usually their golden children. And a narcissistic mother, when she attaches herself to the golden child, and that golden child is a boy, she will make everyone worship that boy. No one can go near that boy. It doesn't matter what mistakes he makes. She will always turn a blind eye because that boy has given her status. That boy has given her honor. Again, we go back to these weird societies in which women used to be praised and congratulated more for having boys. So she would hold on to that boy. It's like a cultural symbol of, I'm not a failure. I was able to give birth to a boy. And I remember, back in the days, women used to be divorced if they only had girls. So if a woman got pregnant and kept having girls, the man would see her as useless. You only give me girls, you don't give me boys. He would divorce her and marry other women out of hope that he would have boys from them. And that's where there was a lot of unfairness in treatment with wives, because if a man, let's say he was married to five or six women, and only one of those women, gave him a son or gave him multiple sons, she would be the favourite one. She would be the one on a pedestal, and she would be the one who would get the best treatment out of all of them. There was no adl, there was no justice in between. The way men used to treat wives. That's a whole podcast, inshallah, for another day. But this is why there's such an emphasis on the equal treatment of wives in polygamy, because men used to marry women out of desire, and when they married women out of desire and out of hope that they would have boys, they would discard the ones who couldn't, and they wouldn't treat those who, for example, if she was barren or if she was only giving birth to girls, he would treat her terribly. He would treat her terribly, like she was useless, like there was no benefit to gain from her whatsoever. So even if he kept her as a wife, he'd treat her so badly and put the others on a pedestal. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala emphasized on the equality between wives, it came from this. It came from men, only praising and rewarding and validating women for the things that they were to gain from those women. And men back in those days as well, in pre-Islamic Arabia, used to actually sleep with women to see if they could get pregnant. If she couldn't get pregnant, she wasn't marriage material. They needed to check that she wasn't barren. All of these toxic practices used to happen to women. And that's why when the Prophet Muhammad came and he gave women so many rights, he gave them for a reason. He was so passionate about, women's rights because they were treated so terribly back in those days. He was very passionate about women's rights. So it's really sad to see in our modern age now that boys are still being favoured over girls, and boys are getting away with sins, even, when they reach teenage age and they're committing zina. They may be smoking weed, they may be going to clubs, they may be doing all of these things. And the woman, the narcissistic mother, will find out. Let's say she's found out that both the brother and sister have been up to no good. She will punish the girl and not the boy. And when the girl asks her, why did you punish me and not him? She says, because boys are different. Boys are different. The girls are different. You're the one who's going to suffer in society. No one's going to marry you if people know that you go to clubs. No one's going to marry you if they know you're not virgin. No one's going to this. No one's going to... So her value is put down immediately. And the boy, his value remains the same if he sins in a major way. It grows a resentment. It grows a deep resentment in the hearts of these girls towards their brothers, towards their fathers, because they feel worthless. They feel that my worth as a woman is reduced to being a housemaid and serving misogynistic Muslim men. Now, these misogynistic Muslim men are often the mummy's boys, right? The mummy boys of these women who put the boy on the pedestal since he was born. And that's where you get the whole narcissistic, horrible mother-in-law. And that mother-in-law is that woman who raised her son to always be the golden child. And he becomes a very difficult husband to have, a very difficult man to live with. And mummy will always have his back. So it doesn't matter what he does to his wife, how difficult he makes her life, how unjust he is. His mother will always support him, and that encourages his narcissism. It fuels his narcissism because to her, her son can do no wrong. Even if she doesn't have a good relationship with her son, she doesn't like to put herself on the front line as a failure as a mother. So she will blame everything on the planet apart from her son's behaviour. She might say he's got black magic, he's got evil eye on him, he's been influenced, the woman's lying, whatever it is. Even if she doesn't have a good relationship with him, the narcissistic mother will always pin the blame on someone or something else, rather than addressing the narcissism in her son. And she will not address it because she's a narcissist herself. So this is how she fuels that. Again, the mummy's boys, they're always encouraged and egged on by their own mothers. And it's the reason why so many codependent women have such massive issues with their mother-in-laws. So you've got that side to it. And then you've also got the side of narcissistic, Muslim women, Muslim mothers who will really pressurize their daughters to marry a specific type of man. Usually he's a narcissistic man. And I say that because if a family receives a proposal for one of the daughters and he's, he just happens to have a good social status or he's wealthy, then the narcissistic mother will push this onto her codependent and empathic daughters in particular. Now, she knows already that her narcissistic daughters are not going to... They might accept, but the marriage may not last very long, and that's detrimental to the reputation of the family. So they will push and force sometimes the codependent and empathic daughters to marry narcissistic men who make them look good in society, right? Oh, look who my daughter married. She married this guy. He's a doctor. He's a lawyer. He's an engineer. He's wealthy. He owns properties. They will manipulate especially their codependent daughters to marry these men, knowing that these men are narcissistic, knowing that these men are problematic, because like I said, narcissists can recognize other narcissists. So when a daughter is put in this position, she's already been conditioned and programmed to serve her parents, and that obedience and compliance is what gives her self-worth and value. So she will often buckle under the manipulation of the narcissistic mother and father to marry someone she's not really keen on marrying. She doesn't really like that much, because an empath or someone with any empathy within them will recognize, discomfort that they feel when they're around somebody. And usually the codependent and empathic women will get a gut instinct. They'll have this feeling that, okay, he's he's a doctor, he's a lawyer, he's this, he's that. He's got a good lifestyle, but there's just something not right about him. There's something I can't put my finger on. They will always know that. And that feeling causes them to tell their parents, I'm not sure. I don't know I don't really feel comfortable with this guy. And then the pressurizing and manipulation starts. So the narcissistic mother, because now she's looking out for her own self. She doesn't care about her daughter and how her daughter feels. She's looking at it as, if my daughter marries this lawyer or engineer or surgeon, I'm going to look good in society. I have something to brag about. I have something to feel proud of. So she will push this onto her daughter and pressurize her. And in some societies, the woman is forced. The woman is forced to marry someone she doesn't want to marry. And in many cases, religious manipulation is used here. The mother might say, if you do not accept this marriage, I will never forgive you. I will die and I will not forgive you. You have a duty towards your parents to obey them. I carried you for 9 months. I did this. I looked after you when you were sick. And this is the thanks I get. This is the thanks I get. I bring you someone good to marry and you say no and throw this in my face after everything I've done for you. The guilt trip starts to happen. The guilt trip starts, and the daughters are manipulated into marrying men they don't want to marry, because now they're conscious, they're moral conscious, and their religious conscience is kicking in, and they're worried now that if they don't marry this person, not only are they going to have a bad relationship with their mother going forward, which they don't want because their mother is already problematic and they don't want to deal with even more narcissism from the mother. They also worry about the mother dying and not forgiving them, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not being pleased with them. So there are many cases in which the daughters will succumb to this type of manipulation and marry a man whom they don't really want, just to please the parents, please the mother. And they'll just sit by and watch the mother create a whole palaver over it, a whole drama over it, and all massive wedding and showing off and bragging to everybody, but deep inside they're not happy. So this is not the man they want to marry, but they've been manipulated into accepting this marriage. And this is obviously haram. We know that this is haram in Islam. You cannot pressurize or force a woman to marry anybody. And in these situations, when someone requests something haram of you, something that is unlawful, then you have no duty to be obedient to, whether it's your father, your mother, your husband, whoever, because they've asked you to do something that goes against the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Here you can put your foot down and say no. It's haram to be pressurized or forced into a marriage you don't want. I'm not doing it. There are a lot of women who know that this is haram, it's forbidden, but they are worried about their mothers never speaking to them again, because that's what they're threatened with. If you don't marry this man, you're on your own, you're disowned. I'll never speak to you again. You owe me this, oh, you're not thinking about me. None of my daughters are married. I don't have any grandchildren. You'll get manipulated that way. And then the daughters will, even though they know it's haram for them to be forced or pressurized into a marriage, because of the guilt and because of the worry that they will have even worse relationships with their parents, they just accept. And again, when women are pressurized into marrying problematic men, narcissistic men they don't feel comfortable with from the beginning, they only get themselves into toxic marriages, very toxic marriages. You're not in a happy marriage. You are encouraging men to abuse other people's daughters when you allow your mummy's boy to inflict abuse on someone else's daughter, and you also encourage men to treat their wives in the ways that they treat your daughters when you pressurize them into marrying. And believe me, men are not stupid. A man will know when a woman has been pressurized into marrying him. He will know, and that's when he takes full advantage, because he knows that the family don't care about her feelings, and he will know that her heart's not really in it, and that's when the abuse starts, because he knows that they're after some sort of gain, and they're going to fear their daughter being divorced. They don't want their daughter being divorced. So this is when a man who knows that she's been forced, a narcissistic man, will take advantage. Now, if he's an empathic man, he'll be compassionate with her, and he will actually try his best to make her feel as comfortable as possible, or he will not agree to the marriage in the first place. But a narcissistic man will go ahead with a marriage with a woman whom he knows doesn't really want to be there, because he has some sort of gain to benefit as well. Maybe she's very beautiful, or maybe she's, from a family who's got, a good social status or whatever. So, but believe me, he'll make her pay for that. He'll make her pay for not wanting him, because it's a hit to the ego. It's a hit to the ego. Why wouldn't you want me? And now he goes into the marriage with an attitude of, oh, you think you're better than me, do you? I have all of this. I have all this money and all these properties, and I'm a surgeon, and I'm this and I'm that, and you don't want to marry me? What's wrong with you? Oh, I'll show you what's wrong with you. Boy, will I show you what's wrong with you. And that's what happens. This is why it's haram in Islam to force anybody to marry anybody. Whether it's a mother or a father forcing and pressurizing their son to marry a woman they don't want to marry, or a mother or a father forcing their daughter or pressurizing their daughter to marry a man they don't want to marry. Because a lot of abuse can come out of it. And it will be very difficult to even be intimate with that person when you're not attracted to that person. You're not attracted. Mom, I don't want to marry this guy. I'm not attracted to him. Attraction will grow. Love will grow. Don't worry about it. It will come later. You think I was attracted to your dad when I married him? You think I loved your dad when I married him? No, it came afterwards. And then you step back and look at the relationship between your mom and your dad, and you think, there still is no love after 30, 40 years. This is an abusive marriage after 30, 40 years. What you're talking about. So a narcissistic mother will pressurize her daughter and won't care if she's going into a relationship with a narcissistic man. Even if the woman complains later, maybe in the engagement period, in the nikah period, Mum, he's doing this, Mum, he's doing that. The narcissistic mother will say, all men are like this. All men are like this. Suck it up. It's fine. You think you're better than all of us. You can't deal with this. I dealt with this with your father. Your auntie dealt with this, and your sisters dealt with this. You think you're special or something to not have to deal with this? This is men. This is marriage. You wanted to get married. You said many times, I want to get married. I want to get married. This is marriage. And they'll put the woman in a situation where she's now being brainwashed to normalize abuse, to normalize problematic behavior in the early stages of an engagement. Because the mother is convincing her that all men are like this, all men are problematic, all men are petty, all men are jealous over nothing, all men are insecure. When a woman is fed that information, she now starts to normalize it herself, and that's how a lot of women brush a lot of red flags under the carpet, and they still go ahead and marry these toxic men. And if a woman, especially a codependent, if she does end up with a man who is good and kind and empathic, and, he later on treats her really well, he might have status, he might be a surgeon, doctor, lawyer, whatever, and he might end up being, an empath, or at the very least a codependent, but not narcissistic. The narcissistic mother will actually be jealous of her daughter. She will actually be very jealous of her daughter, that she's getting treated better in her marriage than she did in hers. And her narcissistic sisters will also be jealous of their sister who's married a nice, kind, good-hearted man, because they've all married narcissists for their own reasons, and they're not getting treated well. But they see that their codependent sister or their empathic sister is, enjoying her marriage and she's being treated well. They hate it. They get so jealous, so envious, including the mother. And that's when the mother will start to try and sabotage that daughter's marriage. She'll interfere in everything. You get so many men who say, my mother-in-law is a nightmare. I'm happy with my wife, but my mother-in-law is always interfering in the marriage. She just won't leave us alone. There's always something. She's always nitpicking on things. You haven't done this and you haven't done that. This house isn't good enough. This car isn't good enough for my daughter. You need to change jobs. You need to move closer to us. You need to do this. You need to do that. He's like, but we're happy. But she gets involved in everything. She criticizes everything. She jumps into everything. And the daughter will tell her, Mum, I'm fine with this. I'm fine with the house I live in. I'm fine with this furniture. I'm fine with what he does. And the mother-in-law's like, no, you're stupid. No. I'm not letting this go. He has to do this. He has to provide you this. He has to get a better car. And this is when the narcissistic mother tries to sabotage the marriage of her codependent or empathic daughter because she's jealous. She's jealous that her daughter's actually happy. Narcissistic women and men don't like to see each other happy. They don't like to see anyone happy because they're so unhappy inside. They have this deep hate for themselves, self-loathing. They're disgusted at themselves. So when they see other people are happy, it irritates them and they have to sabotage it. So jealousy and envy is they're massive traits of this disorder, of NPD disorder, because they have to have what everyone else has that they don't have. And if they don't have it, they'll sabotage it. And if they can't have it, they'll sabotage it. So be very careful. Narcissistic mother, she will ruin your marriage out of jealousy. And she will even try to break it up, to break up the marriage. She might encourage you to divorce a good man. She might say, oh, he's too weak. He's too this. He doesn't have enough money. What kind of lifestyle? You lived a better lifestyle with us. You've downgraded. And she'll just, she will beat that into her daughter's mind until her daughter gets divorced. In these situations, when a man says to his wife, we need to move away from your family, he's got a right. He has a right here to do that because he's a good guy. He's not trying to manipulate you. He's not trying to isolate you from your family. He can see that your own family is damaging your happiness, damaging your marriage. So when a man says we have to move, again, this is where obedience comes into play, a woman's obedience, because he's actually protecting his marriage now. Genuinely. Not because he's abusing her and the family are telling her to leave and now he wants to run away with his wife and his kids because he wants to get away with the abuse. No. Obedience is not required then. But in this kind of case, obedience would be required because he can clearly see how negatively and how badly she's being affected. Now she's getting depression and anxiety because her mother won't leave her alone, her sisters won't leave her alone. And she's happy. She's telling everyone, I'm happy. And then she genuinely is happy with the guy. She's content with the guy. But everyone keeps sticking their noses in. So I just wanted to make that as a side note because I see this a lot as well. But again, this is what misogynistic Muslim women do, because when that codependent daughter gets divorced, the mother will say, don't worry, I've got someone lined up for you. There's someone I know who would be a better match for you. And then she hooks her up with another narcissist. Because the narcissistic mother and a narcissistic sister, they don't want to see you do better than them. What, you think you can do better than us? No. You're going to marry someone who's just like the man we married. Because you need to live in the same swamp as us. You can't be better. You can't elevate. So the next man that a woman marries after being divorced from a good guy is normally a narcissistic man, because the mother will ensure that will be your next experience. Okay. Another way that these narcissistic Muslim women fuel misogyny and the red pill movement and narcissistic abuse in societies is that they don't allow their daughters to come back home when they're being abused, because they attach divorce to failure. And they would rather their daughters, their codependent and empathic daughters, endure a lifetime of abuse like they did with their narc husbands than shame them by divorcing. And when narcissistic men see that the mothers are encouraging their daughters to stay in toxic marriages, and the men know that the women have complained about the abuse to their parents, and they're still getting sent back home, they're still not being encouraged to leave, they're still not being encouraged to divorce, they're not having any support, The father will say, no, she's not coming back to my house. We have no divorced women here. I have no divorced daughters. I will not accept it. Go back and fix things with your husband. These men are like, oh, perfect. And they continue their abuse because now they are 100% sure the woman has no backbone. The woman has no family to go back to. So the mother who's so obsessed about not having any divorced daughters is the one who encourages the red pill movement in men. She encourages the abuse of other women because they don't offer a safe space for each other. The narcissistic mother's like, no, she's not my problem anymore. She's your problem. You deal with her. You stay married to him, because if you get a divorce, no one's going to look at your face. No one's going to want a single mother. I'm not going to help you. You can't come back here. You'll have to go and get a job and find accommodation elsewhere. And it just adds stress to the daughter because she's thinking, well, I don't have a job. I don't have a career. I have nothing because this narc husband of mine stopped me from doing everything. I've got no financial independence. I don't know where to go. I've got no family to go back to. No mother to support me. I'll just stay here. I'll stay in this toxic marriage. And it encourages men to keep going. Women like this, narc women like this, push their daughters to stay in abusive, toxic marriages because that's what happened to them. And they say to themselves, if I had to deal with that, you're dealing with that too. You're not better than me. The way I dealt with it, you deal with it too. No one's coming to save you. So this is like a huge, contribution that a lot of women make towards the red pill movement, towards the narcissism that's growing in our societies. It's not just the men, it's the women too. And it's always the women who claim to know better, who claim to know what's best for their daughters. And it just develops a deep hate and resentment for those mothers because, over time, the codependent girls and the empathic girls will just distance themselves from their mothers when they're older. They won't want anything to do with them. And so the narcissistic mother loses out in many ways, in many ways with her own children. Because she's always supporting the narcissistic boys in her family, and she's always putting down the women who need help, who actually need the support and need to be fought for and need to be supported in leaving toxic environments, but they're not. Any woman who has a narcissistic mother will relate to this. They will not be helped by those women. And again, a lot of it comes from jealousy. You can't have what I don't have. You're going to have what I have. Or less. You can't be better. And I know it's crazy to think that a mother would even think that way towards her daughter, but it happens. I've seen so many women so jealous of their daughters. If the daughter is more beautiful than the narc mother, she'll hate her. There's an internal resentment towards her daughter for being more beautiful than she is. And you'll see that the mother will go out of her way and do Botox and lip fillers and surgeries out of hope that she will be more beautiful than her beautiful codependent daughters. It doesn't matter if she's codependent, empath or narc. Daughters cannot be more beautiful than narc mothers. And daughters cannot be high achievers more than their mothers were. And daughters cannot marry better. And daughters, basically, they cannot be better in anything. But I have noticed it when the daughter is more beautiful than the mother, she hates that daughter. There's a deep resentment in her for that daughter. And she'll always put that daughter down. Unless the daughter is the narcissistic daughter. If the daughter's a narcissistic daughter, then she will flaunt her narc daughter to other people out of hope that she will marry very well. She will flaunt her and brag about her and everything. Show her off at weddings. But the beautiful codependent and the beautiful empathic daughter, she'll hate them, those two in particular, for being prettier or more beautiful than her. Because she already knows deep down that they are better than her. Because they have empathy and they've got a good heart and they have iman and they have, they're loved by people and she will already have resentment for her daughters for being better. So on top of all of that, if those mothers see that their codependent and empathic daughters are more beautiful than they are, it's a disaster. And they will always put them down. They'll never compliment them, but they will always compliment the narc daughter. It's a crazy dynamic, but it is what it is, right? It is what it is. And this is how they fuel so much abuse that goes on in societies, because when codependent girls are raised without being complimented and validated by their own mothers, then more often than not, they'll just go on to marry someone who is exactly like their mother. So if the majority of their time was spent with a narc mother growing up, they will more often than not marry someone who's got the same traits as the mother. And, you get so many people who say, my husband is just like my mother, my narc mother. It's because they spent so much time with that narc mother, you gravitate towards what's familiar. So it doesn't always come from the dad. If you spent more time with a narc mother growing up, your future husband or wife will be exactly like your mother. Narcissistic in the same way. That's how they fuel it. That's how they contribute towards it. And this is why, I've said this 100 times, you've got to be so careful who you marry. Because if you marry a narcissistic woman, your daughters have had it. And your sons have had it. And if you marry a narcissistic man, the whole family will crumble. The whole family will be dysfunctional from head to toe. So, I'm trying to create an awareness of the importance of actually marrying better. You've got to marry better. You've got to marry empathic, better people to stop this cycle. So, when it comes to narcissistic women, they break out, they rebel against serving Muslim men when they're older, and that's why they're terrible wives. Okay, ask any man who's married to a narcissistic Muslim woman, and he'll tell you, terrible wife. They break out of that, of those clutches of this is how a woman is meant to be. And she is drummed and brainwashed with a very harsh interpretation of Islam as well. And that's why you find a lot of these narcissistic Muslim women, a lot of them claim to be, when you ask them, they claim to be from Ahl al-Salaf. And they would have been raised in a very strict household, very, very strict household, in which, your value was attached to you serving men, and it was also attached to you being this strict as a Muslim. It means that if you can hold on to this strict and harsh interpretation of Islam, it means that you're better than everyone else. You're better than every other person who didn't grow up with the same understanding of Islam. That Wahhabi, very strict, dark understanding of Islam. That's very literal. There's no spiritual element to it. It's just very harsh. It's all haram, halal. It makes these people so resentful of Islam deep within, but this is how they were raised to believe Islam should be and Muslims should be, and they attached it to their self-worth. It's so ingrained in them that they've attached it to their self-worth. So you'll find a lot of these women, they come across as being very practicing, very, very practicing. They'll study to become alimas, they'll be Quran teachers, they will cover from head to toe, full niqab, full everything. And, they would have been raised to believe that your value is in the understanding of Islam that you have, and in you serving men, and in you propping up men. Because women, their place is at home. Their place is in the kitchen. Their place is, to obey and be submissive to the husband. Blindly, by the way, blindly. Now, who are the examples of men that they've had in their lives? The misogynistic ones, the red pill ones, the ones who are harsh and toxic. They haven't had an example of the right type of men who lead them. They haven't had that. So these women grow up believing that they're better than everyone else. And what happens here is that when they come out of, their parents' homes, and they go to college, they go to university, they start interacting with other types of Muslim women. And they come across other Muslim women who don't cover like them or don't understand Islam like them. They don't understand marriage like them. And they develop a hate for those women. There's an internal hate for women who do not look at Islam the way they do. They do not understand their positioning of women like they do. So they see other Muslim women become very ambitious and, they're maybe career-minded. They've got very supportive fathers who allow them to travel, allow them to marry who they want, allow them to pursue, higher university studies, or I wouldn't say allow, but they encourage them. They encourage their daughters to do this. Now, what happens here, unfortunately, in adulthood and even in marriage, so these narcissistic women, when they marry the same types of men as their fathers and brothers, and they get treated like slaves. They get treated like slaves because sometimes narcissistic women can only marry narcissistic men. Because even the empathic men don't want women that strict. They don't want women who are that military in their understanding of Islam. So in a lot of cases, you will find that these women who are so harsh and so rigid in their understanding of Islam, they are the ones who marry other narcissistic men, like the men they're used to, and they breed new generations of red pill Muslim men. Okay? Because the deep hatred that they have for other women who they see as free, they will justify their hate as, we do not love what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam have condemned. So, they will tell these women that we love Allah more than you. We are like the Sahabiyat. We are the ones who are blessed because we have the correct understanding of Islam. All of you are loose. All of you don't know what Islam is. You're all misguided because they see women, like I said, they don't cover as good. They don't live the same lifestyle. These women have more of a free lifestyle in which they're not enchained by their male relatives. So they grow up very bitter. These narcissistic Muslim women grow up very bitter towards other women who are very different from them but seem to be very happy. They're still Muslims, they're still praying, they're still going to Hajj and Umrah and fasting and everything. It's just that they live a different life in accordance to their own understanding of Islam that they've been raised with or that they've developed later in life. So this deep hatred that narcissistic women have for other women, other Muslim women, comes from a lack of acceptance for how they've been raised. A lot of these women who have been raised in a very harsh way, they're not accepting of how they've been raised. They don't like how they've been raised, and they only open their eyes to it when they go to university and see other types of Muslims. That's when their eyes open to it. Now, some people change. Some of these women become lenient and they open their minds to, other interpretations of Islam, other understandings of what it means to be a Muslim. Like being a Muslim woman does not just, condemn you to a life in the kitchen or condemn you to a life of obedience to a clown of a man. No, a Muslim woman can also follow her passions and follow her dreams of being a doctor, a surgeon, a lawyer, whatever she wants. Islam does not prohibit a woman from pursuing an education or pursuing a career. Everything is within its limits. There are things that need to be prioritized when you have children, you get married, and so on. But Islam doesn't stop a woman from doing any of these things. Now, the understanding that these narcissistic women had growing up was that Islam does not permit these things for women. And in order for you to become that kind of woman, you need to have the permission of your husband, the permission of your father, and only with the permission of your father could you pursue a higher education or pursue a career. So the jealousy that a lot of narcissistic Muslim women feel within themselves towards other women comes out in them being very judgmental. And that's why you get very judgmental Muslim women who will nitpick on everything that other women do. They will criticize everything that other women do. They're not kind and they're not loving. They will always be the ones to advise you and criticize and nitpick because you're now opening their eyes to something that's completely out of their comfort zone, And now you are a threat to their understanding of me being better than everyone else. Because if I'm better than everyone else, how come I'm so miserable and they're all so happy? If I'm better than everyone else, then why are people not following my way and they're choosing to follow other ways of, implementing Islam in their lives? So the narcissistic part of these women become even more stubborn. It becomes even more stubborn and pushes their problematic understanding of Islam in their lives, and they push it onto everybody. And not only do they push it onto everybody, they will only make friends with people who have the same mindset, and they will only marry men who have the same mindset. And that is to preserve their entire existence, because facing the fact that the way that they live their whole lives is a lie and incorrect is just too much. It's just way too much. This is all they know how to be. They don't know how to be anyone else or any other type of Muslim woman. And at the same time, they've also been indoctrinated to believe that if they were to step out of this circle of being too hard, too strict, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not love them and they'll get punished and all of that. So narcissistic Muslim women become even more stubborn as they grow older. They become even more stubborn and even more red pill. And these are the women who get together with red pill misogynistic men in YouTube videos and online platforms, wherever it is, and they support the views of misogynistic Muslim men. They say, yes, a woman should be disciplined. A woman should be, should accept her husband marrying 2, 3, or 4 on top of her. A woman should stay at home and obey her husband and be submissive. A woman is rebellious if she doesn't do that. They support these men. And what happens when they support these men is that the men get fueled. So a toxic patriarchal society cannot thrive if men don't have the support of other women. They can't, because if all women were to stand up to them and say, no, we're not having any of this, there would be no toxic patriarchal society. The reason why we still have them dotted around in our ummah is because of the women. The women support them. And it's always women who are bitter, women who are angry, women who actually hate men, women who cannot stand to believe that they are not a cut above the rest. They need to be stubborn and they need to persevere in their own understanding of what it means to be a good Muslim woman and to be Allah's favourite. And that's why they're so judgmental, because they believe that they're better. However, subhanAllah, you'll always find, and I saw this growing up, so many women who weren't that practicing were so much kinder and more loving and more gentle and empathic than women who are like this. Women who used to be so strict, so harsh. They used to be vile in their language when they fight with anybody, argue with anybody. They would be the ones who live a double life because, again, they're not accepting of who they are. You'll find a lot of these women live double lives. In front of everybody, they're this strict, Salafi, pious, practicing woman. But behind closed doors, there's somebody else. They might go to clubs, they might have boyfriends, they might have a completely different life. But they cannot let go of that religious facade because it gives them some sort of power in society. When people see that they're strict and harsh, and when people see that they are very pious, it's a facade. They get that power and authority in their societies, and women look up to them. Women in their own societies look up to them. But those who are not like that at all will run away from women like this. They don't like to be around women who are this judgmental and this harsh and this critical of how someone chooses to practice Islam. These women fuel the red pill movement. And it's unfortunate because these men cling on to the opinions and the support of these women to say, you see, this is from women. Even women are saying this. Even women are saying women are problematic. Even women are saying that wives are the problems in marriages. Even women are saying that it's not Islamic of them to not accept if their husbands want to take on more than one wife. You know, it makes me so angry when I hear women say that, I'm talking about these red pill women, when they say that there's an iman issue in women who are not okay with their men taking on second, third and fourth wives. Who the hell are you to say that? I'm telling you now, there's no issue with your iman at all. If a woman is not happy with her husband taking a second, third and fourth wife, there's nothing wrong with your iman. This is your natural fitrah as a woman. Women also have a protective nature over those people they love. And, you know, I've heard some of these women say really weird and crazy things like, in the day and age that we live in, women who have good husbands should be offering their husbands to other women, you know, and become involved in polygamous marriages. What cuckoo land are you guys living in? What woman is going to do that with a man she loves, and then when she doesn't do it, you now brand her as having iman issues and not loving for your sister what you love for yourself, and not, you know, having that sincerity in your iman and your tawakkul in Allah. What on earth is going on? You know, like, who are you to say these women have an iman issue? Give me one hadith that shows Khadija radiallahu anha ever went round offering the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ as a husband to other women. One hadith, you won't find any in Sahih Bukhari or Muslim, because I promise you, if she did, it would have been in there. It would have been in there. There were women at that time who were widowed, women who were single mothers, there were orphans at that time. It didn't happen. He never took on another wife while he was with her. It has nothing to do with women having an iman issue. I think this might need to be a podcast for another day, because I don't want to go off on one right now about this. But it's just an example of things that these women say that fuel the red pill movement in Muslim men. Because red pill Muslim men have this obsession with polygamy. They have this obsession with having multiple wives. So when they are supported by women who say these ridiculous things without understanding the concept of empathy, you know, if you had empathy, you wouldn't say something like that. If you had empathy, you would consider the feelings of the first wife. You would consider that a whole family might break up because of it. Why are you pushing polygamy out there and destroying families just because you choose to support problematic men who are clearly problematic? There's not even a doubt about it. The red pill Muslim men are clearly problematic. So women who support them, and they only bring women who support them, by the way, on their channels usually, because they know that there are women in societies who will have been raised in that way, or they have, and I see it with a lot of reverts as well. A lot of reverts, when they enter Islam, they fall into the grip of these women, these very strict, harsh women, red pill women, and they kind of, indoctrinate again all of this information into them. And then I just find it really strange when I see revert sisters being like this as well. Revert women from going, literally, they've gone from 0 to 100 in their understanding of life and relationships, because they have been programmed by the same women who were programmed by their problematic mothers. And now you'll find Western women acting and living like our grandmothers did in a very toxic societies, and they end up being with very misogynistic red pill men. How did a revert end up with a red pill misogynistic Muslim man? It's because the women who taught her about Islam, the women in her society, are these same narcissistic women who are fueling toxic masculinity and toxic patriarchy. That is the only way revert sisters get involved in all of this rubbish as well. And how they end up marrying such disgusting narcissistic Muslim men who ruin them and ruin their faith. Many of these women will leave Islam as well because of what they've seen. It comes from them befriending problematic red pill women. And like I said, even if a woman wasn't raised that way, sometimes if she's got a narcissistic nature, she will lean more towards this this understanding of Islam, because she gets power from narcissistic Muslim men. The power, and that you see them around, and they have that, they intimidate people, and they have that power. You find that these are the men who gain a lot of following, and they have got massive platforms. So when women marry these men, it gives them power too. It gives them power as well. They are also put in a position of, let me help you and we can become famous together. Now, all of a sudden, when a woman reaches that level of, that status level by marrying a misogynistic Muslim man, they now do things together. They'll open projects together. She will now become, a boss woman. She will open a business. She throws herself into so much in order to, patch up what she believes is lost from her value as a woman. She now wants to become like all the other women who are ambitious, pursuing studies and pursuing careers and everything. And when women who were raised to just, be servants and obedient to the men in their families come across women who are ambitious, they start off by hating them. And then they go to another stage, which is, we're going to compete with them. So these women are often very competitive. They don't support other women. They are horrible to other women. They will not collaborate with women who are not like them. They only collaborate with each other. I've reached out to so many of these women to review my book. No support whatsoever. Because they see other women as competition. They have this bitterness and envy and anger towards other women doing things that they wish they could have done themselves. I'm saying it raw. I'm not sugarcoating anything. Because this is a lot, what I'm saying in all my podcasts are what a lot of people are thinking but cannot say. I will say it. Red pill Muslim women, narcissistic, misogynistic women who are okay with being treated in a strange way by men are those who become very competitive and very, very bitter with other types of Muslim women. And now they want to clamber on the top. Now when they've managed to get some sort of freedoms later on in life as adults, maybe they've been divorced, maybe they've been, whatever. They take it as an opportunity to break out of, the way that they've been raised and stay as they are as red pill, but also become boss women, independent women. And at the same time, they teach Islam in the same way that they were raised. And they know it's problematic. And they get supported by the misogynistic Muslim men, and that's what keeps them going. It keeps them going. A lot of these women as well, these narcissistic Muslim women, are okay with secret marriages. They're okay with misyard marriages, in which they don't have many rights. They're okay with being used and abused in the name of it being halal. All of these women who get into very weird marriages with these red pill men, most of them are narcissistic women, because narcissistic women are also after the dunya. Narcissistic Muslim women, I don't care what she's wearing. She could be in a niqab head to toe. These women can also be extremely materialistic. They gather lots of money. They buy loads of properties. They're investing, companies and crypto, and they'll do all of that because they do want the good life. They do want the finer things in life. It doesn't, a materialistic life like that cannot go hand in hand with a spiritual Islamic life. You can't. And that's why you see women who don't seem as practicing as these women, but they're spiritual and they're not materialistic. They're not attached to this dunya. And then you find women who come across as being very strict, very religious, very pious, but they're on a mission to, to gather as many things and properties and companies as possible and all of that. And that's why it's these Muslim women who cripple men in court. These are the women who cripple men in court because they need to get the maximum out of that man. And I say that because I know, because I've seen it in court. I've seen men be totally destroyed by women like this. Women who've come across, they married these women believing that, and most of these men are codependent, marrying these women believing that they are, mashallah, very pious, very religious and steadfast, and they'll be good mothers because they have an understanding of marriage being, very traditional. Woman stays at home and this and that. Only to be surprised later when she uses him as a stepping stone to achieve all her goals and missions in life. She will neglect her children, and then when he comes to divorce this narcissistic Muslim woman, she will use the kuffar, the Western system, to destroy him. How many times have we seen that? How can someone be so pious and so religious but use the Western system, court system, in both divorce and child custody to completely destroy somebody just because that man can no longer bear and tolerate life with this woman? This is where we see a lot of problematic cases that are very contradictory. And this is why a lot of men get put off marriage, because they say to themselves, well, if these strict Muslim women ended up being like this, then what are the non-practicing ones like? What are the ones who are not that practicing like? They worry, not knowing that actually it's the ones who aren't showing a strict religious facade that are actually sometimes better, because they have empathy, and the ones who are showing the religious facade lack empathy. They lack a lot of empathy. And I see that lack of empathy in their lectures and their workshops and their videos. And again, we go back to, their perceptions of women. And it's almost like they hate other women. For example, I saw a video the other day of one of these, I'm not going to name anybody, but you'll know who they are when you go on YouTube. And she was saying that women have an expiry date. A high-value man will only want a woman who is also high value, and a high-value woman is one who is young and virgin, and beautiful. If she's not young, virgin and beautiful, she may as well just die, because there's no hope. There's no hope for a woman like that. And God forbid if she's divorced with children, woman, don't even bother praying tahajjud for a high-value man, because you're living in cuckoo land if you think that you're going to get someone like that. Now, when women tell other women things like this, and they tell women that if you get to a certain age, or you're a single mother, the only people you deserve, or the only people you are entitled to, are the ugly, fat, misogynistic Muslim men that no one else wants. Or the men who want polygamous marriages and they're broke, they don't have money. So if you have your own house and you're already settled somewhere, then the best you're going to get is to offer yourself as a second, third or fourth wife to one of these clowns. That's all you're going to get, because that's your value. You've missed your train. I was livid when I heard that. Because if you had empathy, you wouldn't speak to other women like that. There are so many women out there who haven't been married before, and they're in their 30s and 40s because of parental responsibilities, because the male relatives in their families are rubbish, just to put it in a civil manner, absolute rubbish, because they've got black magic on them, because they've suffered from depression, because they've suffered from an illness, because, they've had to be the breadwinner in that family because they were the only sibling left in specific circumstances where they had to be the ones to look after, their siblings growing up and so on. There are loads of reasons why women weren't able to get married. So when another woman comes along, who is supposedly very religious and very, mashallah, pious, and she tells women that if you've hit the 30 mark and you've never been married and you're not beautiful and no high value man's going to look at your face, What is that going to do to other women and the mental health of other women? Some women are suicidal because they feel so unloved and so unworthy and so unwanted because they've never been married and they've reached their 30s, 40s and 50s. You can fuel suicidal thoughts in other women who are watching your lectures by saying stupid things like that. Where's Islam in this? Where's the empathy in this? This is why when I see women speak about other women, I can immediately recognise the insecurity and the hatred that they have towards other women, the bitterness they have towards other women. Why would you say that? Why would you say that to your sisters? And I'll tell you something. If that were true, if it was true that a woman's value lay in her youth and beauty and virginity, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wouldn't have allowed the Prophet Muhammad to marry Khadija radiallahu anha. He wouldn't have allowed it because he would have said, well, the Prophet deserves the best of all women. He's the best of all men. He's the most beloved to me of all humans. He deserves the young, beautiful virgin woman. He wouldn't have married a woman who was twice divorced before, with 2 children. He wouldn't have married a woman who was much older than him, who had much more life experience than him. He wouldn't have. A woman's value lies in her character and her ability to be a comfort for a man and a man's peace and a man's stability, a man's home. You could have all the beauty in the world, all the youth in the world, but if you're not a man's comfort, peace, and his sanctuary, you have no value. Your value is lost. The value of that beauty is lost. When a man sees your narcissistic side in that beautiful face, you no longer become beautiful to that man. You now become hideous to that man because all he's dealing with is your narcissism. So how dare women say this to other women when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has clearly given us the best of examples? If marrying a young virgin woman is guaranteed to give you children, beautiful children, Aisha radiallahu anha would have had children. She was the youngest of his wives. She was a beautiful woman. She never had any children. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put her purpose in something else. It's a woman's value is not in her ability to have children and not in her ability to remain as young as possible. Her value lies in her character, because if a woman's value lay in her ability to have children or in her being very beautiful, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have been just. He would have made all women beautiful, very beautiful, and he would have made all women fertile. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us some women will have boys, some women will have girls, some women will have both, and some women will have none. So how can you say that a woman's value lies in her ability to have children or to have sons or to have daughters? You know, I'll tell you something as well with misogynistic Muslim women. The ones who put the boys on the pedestal. There is a hadith of the Prophet Muhammad where he said, "Min barakat al-mar'a ibtikaraha bil-untha." And this means, amongst the blessings of a woman, is that her firstborn be a girl. And you know why he said that? It's because, and actually I find this fascinating, because he had the understanding of modern psychology that it took people 1200 years to understand today. He knew that if boys are always put on a pedestal and they become narcissistic, they'll be useless to their parents in old age. They'll be useless because they feel so entitled to do whatever they want. Narcissistic boys growing up lack empathy. And when they lack empathy, growing up, they won't have that sense of responsibility towards their parents in old age. They won't be the ones who will look after their parents in old age. It will be the girls. So the Prophet Muhammad said, if the firstborn is a girl and she was raised in a way to have empathy, and even if she didn't have empathy, she was raised to believe that her parents and the men in her family are to be served, then it's that girl, that woman, when she grows up, who's going to take care of her parents. That's where her blessings are going to come from. And you will find so many narrations in ahadith and also in other stories from the periods of Al-Khulafa al-Rashideen, and even until now, where it's always been the daughter who's been the mercy to her parents. It's the daughter who's been the one, to take care of her parents in old age and when they're sick and all of that. And there were stories of men breaking down out of regret when they saw that all their sons had left them, to move to different countries, and they married foreign women. And they did not look back on their parents because they grew up with the understanding that parents don't have to rely on me. They've got our sisters to lean on now. They've got our sisters. And it's those sisters who usually gave up marriage, gave up having children because the male relatives in their families left them with the responsibility of caring for their elderly parents. And then it's only then, in very old age, do a lot of parents realise that they made a mistake and that they should have been more loving and nurturing and caring towards their daughters, because they got nothing from their narcissistic sons growing up. Nothing. So, it's the narcissistic women who have fueled this movement have caused a lot of damage in our societies, a lot of damage. And this damage, I'm going to create separate podcasts for them, because there honestly is just so much to get through. I've said this a few times, but the subject of polygamy and the red pill movement amongst women in polygamy, I'm telling you, that's a whole subject on its own, a whole subject. I will get around to recording it because it's something that really needs to be addressed. It's a very toxic movement that we're seeing amongst these narcissistic Muslim women who are going around stealing other women's husbands, basically. They're stealing other women's husbands in the name of Islam, in the name of them being able to be second, third and fourth wives. And it's just creating so much chaos and havoc and depression in our societies, in our marriages, that's just making people feel like being a Muslim is just too hard. It's just too hard to be Muslim. A lot of people don't want to be Muslim anymore because of having to deal with these men and these women. And as long as red pill Muslim men are being supported by these types of narcissistic women, we will always have these problems. We will always have these social problems. And I need people to wake up to them. When you wake up to them, you will understand that you've also been brainwashed. You've been brainwashed by the same people who raised them in a very toxic way. You're now going through the same upbringing as them. So I really wanted to touch upon that because it's just something that I'm seeing now that's just not being addressed. It's not being addressed. The red pill Muslim men are being attacked, and the women, there's a blind eye being turned to the women who are also contributing towards our problematic societies. Narcissistic women do things deliberately. They know exactly what they're doing, as opposed to codependent women, and I'm coming on to the codependent woman now. Narcissistic women know what they're doing. And it's almost like a revenge that they're taking on other women when they allow men and fuel men to be this way. So when they fuel men to be misogynistic and to be harsh in their understanding of gender roles and marital roles, it's almost like, no, you're going to deal with the same men we've had to deal with all our lives. You think that we're going to be happy and allow you to marry empathic, wonderful men with a different understanding of Islam, and you have better lives than we do? We're going to make sure that all you women end up with the same men that we've ended up with all our lives, that we've had to deal with. You don't get better men than we do. So we're going to brand the men that you marry, those empaths that you marry, as simps. Oh, simps. Simps and weak men. They are fueling the ideology that highly empathic men who are more flexible and more lenient in their understanding of Islam are simps, and men who are not the true men of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that the men who are true to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are these men who, yes, well done for saying this, well done, yes, women need to be disciplined. We will support men with this mindset because we need all other women to marry the same types of men we're stuck with. It's projection. It's projection. No one in their right mind would marry a red pill Muslim man. No one in their right mind. Even a narcissistic woman doesn't want to be treated like a housemaid or like an inferior under the leadership of someone who has no emotional intelligence. But the only men they will attract in their lives are these men, the red pill, because they're easy. Okay, they're easy to have as wives. Red pill Muslim men actually love women who... They also love women who are not like those women because they're a challenge. Now, women who are more lenient in their understanding of Islam and more peaceful and spiritual, they become even more they become bigger challenges to them, to break them. And like I said before, demons come together, demonic energy comes together. So if a misogynistic Muslim man is out to corrupt women who have a peaceful understanding of Islam, and they, especially if they're covert and they slide into the lives of empaths and then change those lives of those empaths drastically by pretending to admire them being teachers, lawyers, business owners, and then forcing them to change after marriage into being those types of harsh, strict women who are at home, and you're now forced to wear a niqab and you're forced to wear full abaya going out, and you're not allowed to work anymore, and you're not allowed to do this and you're not allowed to do that. They want to turn the rest of the Muslim women into those women. They want to turn them into those women by force. And that is why so many women drastically change after marriage, because now they're being brainwashed into believing that the Islam that they were raised to have, the Islamic understanding they were raised to have, is the incorrect one, and you need to follow our harsh, strict way of Islam, following Islam, because this is the way of the Sahabiyat and the Sahaba. We want you to live 7th century Arabia in 2023. That's how you will truly be a person of God. That is how you will truly be following Islam. Don't follow the deviant feminists and the deviants of society today. Just because you have a career or you're pursuing higher education. Why do you think a lot of women do a 180 after marriage? They go from, coming from quite a decent background, a nice peaceful background, and all of a sudden you see them walking around in a niqab and a abaya and changing their views on Islam and changing their views on women and marriage and everything. It's like, whoa, where did that come from? And like I said, you see it in a lot of reverts. Reverts are a prime example of this. They want women to be like them because they believe they're superior, and they want women to believe that this is the best they can get, and this is their role in society, this is their role in marriage. It's fixed. They're all stuck in the same little tiny box where they have to serve a man and be obedient to a man. A man, again, with no emotional intelligence. They work together. Guys, these people work together. The red pill Muslim men and the red pill Muslim women, they all work together to turn people into them, to turn people into them. And that's why you find so many women when they do get brainwashed into believing that, okay, their way of Islam is the right way of Islam, they become very depressed and very bitter and very angry people. This is a clear indication that they're following the wrong understanding of Islam. If it's made you bitter and hateful and strict and judgmental, then that understanding of Islam is the wrong understanding of Islam. Because Islam is actually meant to make you happy and free and joyful and non-judgmental. You have that empathy you have enough empathy to understand everyone has their life journey and everyone is the way they are because of things that they've been through in their life. We don't judge. Khalas, whatever. If you see a woman without hijab, it doesn't matter. It's not your business. It's not your business. Advise her kindly if you want to, if you can, if it's going to be received in a kind way, if you're going to give it in a kind way, in a loving way. You see something you don't like, leave that person alone. Leave that person alone. Because you don't know why they're not wearing hijab. You don't know why they're not praying. You don't know why they're not fasting. Leave people alone. It's already enough that we have ourselves to heal and our traumas to get past. and our own shortcomings and faults to reconcile with and sort out than to go around pointing out everyone else's faults. People who point out everyone else's faults are distracting themselves from their own. It's easier to pick out other people's faults and not focus on your own. When deep down you're a very problematic person, you're a very depressed person, you're a very bitter, angry person. I don't follow the Islamic teachings of those people who come across as being very bitter and depressed. I can't. It's not possible. Because people who are genuinely passionate about Islam, they're happy people. The scholars who you see, who really do love Islam, they're very happy people. Look at Mufti Mink, for example. He's always laughing, he's always joking. He's not a depressed man. He doesn't have that darkness inside of him, but a lot of others do. They have that. Men and women. So that's how they fueled. That's how Muslim women have fueled the Red Pill movement, because they've supported men in their views, and it's encouraged men to keep going. It's encouraged men to keep working on women who are narcissists like them, or empaths, because again they want to bring the empath down. They want to bring the empath down. A lot of these empathic women have been brainwashed by narcissistic Muslim men who come across as being very religious. It's a phase that empaths go through, and then once they're out of that situation, they go back to being how they were and better. Because they're like, what the hell was I dealing with? What the hell was I in? I can't believe I had that understanding of Islam. I cannot believe I became such a disturbed person, a disturbed Muslim. I can't believe I was that kind of person. Every empath who has come out of a relationship with a red pill Muslim man who has brainwashed her into believing that her primary role is to be a housemaid and to serve and cook and clean and obey and be submissive and be okay with him stopping her from everything she loves. Every woman who's come out of that has come out like she was in some sort of fog. What did I do? How did I accept that? I wasn't raised like that. I was raised to be free. I was raised by a father who allowed me to do this and do that. I was raised by a single mother who was independent. And, you know, she encouraged me to pursue a higher degree, and she encouraged me to, to step into my purpose. How did I become that person? A lot of people have said that. I've been through it myself. My ex was highly red pill, highly misogynistic. I didn't see that hateful women that he had until after I married him. But boy, did he force that niqab on me. Boy, did he force that big abaya on me. Boy, did he stop me from doing a lot of things that I used to enjoy doing in the name of Islam. Women are not raised to be like this. Your mother did not raise you properly. Your mother this, your mother that, your father this, your father that. He was actually worse than my dad was. My father was, I wouldn't even say he hated women. He didn't. My father was just very strict in his understanding of Islam. Very strict. But never did he force us to wear a niqab. Never did he force us to do certain things. I married someone who was 10 times worse than my dad in his strictness and his harshness when it came to teaching Islam. And you'll get that. You'll get that until you wake up to the correct understanding of Islam. My father was very lenient in many things. He was very chilled in many things. Unlike a lot of men you marry, your fathers can often be more lenient than your husband. So that's the part about the narcissistic Muslim women. That's the bigger chunk. The chunk about codependence is not as big. It's the codependency in Muslim women. That's, it's unintentional. Now, obviously, when women are raised in toxic households and they become codependent unknowingly. And codependent means being a people pleaser. Being codependent means that I put everyone's needs before my own. So there are two types of codependence here. The codependent who is the heavy people pleaser. So if she does end up marrying a man like this who is red pill, she will, because she's a people pleaser, she will do everything she can to make that man happy. Even if it means changing her entire identity to please him. Even if it means stopping everything that she loves and not working, not studying, not pursuing her hobbies and dreams and passions, not socializing with her friends anymore. A lot of women do this in the name of love, in the name of her fearing Allah, in the name of Islam. When you're so highly codependent, you can give up so much in the name of Islam, in the name of love. Because what a lot of these red pill Muslim men do, especially if they're covert, they're the sneaky ones, not the overt ones, the covert. The covert ones will love bomb you so badly that you will fall so deeply in love with them that you will just the codependent woman will do whatever it takes to please this man, even if it means giving up her entire identity, all her principles, and everything she loves in life. So she unknowingly fuels the red pill movement by being that codependent woman and supporting his misogynistic, patriarchal ways, toxic patriarchal ways. She supports that now in the name of love and in the name of Islam. And he goes around telling everyone, mashallah, look at my wife. She gave up all of that for me. She gave up all her dreams and hobbies and passions to serve me. She's obedient. She's submissive. She doesn't argue. She's pretty much a doormat, right? She becomes a complete doormat to that man. He goes and tells everyone about her, and now all these other men want women like that too. And they go and prey on codependence. This is how it all fits in, you see. These misogynistic Muslim men, they feed on codependent Muslim women who are used to dealing with misogynistic Muslim men because they come from that environment. They don't know any better. Codependent women who have been raised by toxic fathers and they've been raised with toxic brothers and all of that. They come from horrible patriarchal societies. It's normal for them to come across someone who's red pill. It's what they've dealt with all their lives, right? They know how to deal with men like this. They know that to please a man like that, just cook for him, clean for him, do these basic things, and, say yes to everything, don't argue, stay silent. This is what a narcissistic Muslim mother teaches her daughter. Never argue with a man. Never argue with your husband. Never have an opinion. If he says this, you say okay. If he does this, you say okay. Now, narcissistic Muslim mothers will teach this primarily to her codependent daughters. She will also teach this to her narcissistic daughters, but they know that their narcissistic daughters are rebellious. They're not going to do it. They're not going to be those, those obedient housewife types of women. So they teach them how to manipulate men. Narcissistic Muslim mothers will teach them manipulation tactics, how to get their way with a narcissistic man, because they can see their daughters, they won't last very long in marriage if they're not obedient and submissive. So how can I get my daughter to live with another narc man? Because I know that's all she's going to get, being the woman she is. You either target someone who's codependent, or if you marry another narcissistic Muslim man, this is how you manipulate him. And I'm going to do another podcast about what happens when two Muslim narcissists marry. There's a whole dynamic to that. What happens when a Muslim man who's narcissistic marries a Muslim woman who's narcissistic? It's another subject for another day, but it's coming. So the narcissistic Muslim mother, when she recognizes that her daughter is narcissistic, she will teach her how to manipulate. And you see it. You see it in all those Musad Salat, the Kuwaiti, the Pakistani, the Indian, all those Egyptian series. You see how the narcissistic mother is always so toxic, and she teaches her daughters how to manipulate men and how to manipulate other people. And that's why the narcissistic Muslim woman who's red pill is highly manipulative. Highly manipulative. She knows how to manipulate Muslim men. She knows how to manipulate the narc Muslim man very well. They fall for it. Even the narcissistic Muslim man cannot compete with a woman who is narcissistic and manipulative. He will fall into her clutches. Women who have been taught very well by their mothers often apply it to their husbands as well, both the codependent husbands and the narc husbands. These women do not attract empaths, and red pill Muslim men do not attract empaths as well, unless they are highly covert and very manipulative in emulating or imitating empathic behaviour. So, going back to the codependent. So the codependent woman, the people pleaser, she's used as an example in society that these women exist. And so these narc predators prey on women who have been raised in in this kind of very traditional way, cultural way, and they're codependent. They seek those women out because they have empathy. Those women have empathy in them, and the people-pleasing part of them comes from their empathy. And these men know that if we can get these women to fall so deeply in love, then they can manipulate these women into believing that they're doing a great job at being slaves, basically. They will turn those women into slaves. And it's these relationships that turn very toxic. Very toxic, domestic violence can be, often witnessed here because when the codependent woman starts to have enough and she starts to break out of it, he's now unaccepting of that. He's like, no, I married you as a codependent. You do not scam me. You do not now turn into a strong woman because you've learnt from YouTube or you've learnt from wherever that this isn't the way a woman is supposed to live. This isn't the role of a wife. This isn't how marriage is supposed to be. As soon as a codependent woman starts to wake up to that, that's when the physical violence will start. That is when, narcissistic abuse will go up a level or up 10 levels. It's here it will start, and that's why their relationships, codependent narc relationships, are horrific, disgusting, highly toxic. And this is when he will enforce upon her second wife, third wife, enforce upon her loads of other things that he wants to do. Obviously, as we know, these men are highly hypocritical as well. What they get away with in life is as a result of them getting away with things as boys when they were younger. So now they say to their wives, well, it's okay if I cheat, I can get away with it. I'm not going to, be held accountable for this or that, or they'll halalify it by saying I can have multiple wives. But if a woman cheats, she could get killed. She could get beaten black and blue for the same sin that he's committed. But his misogynistic ways have been fueled by the narcissistic Muslim women who raised him. Because he was always put on a pedestal for just being a boy. And he wasn't raised to be al-Qawwam. It was enough that he was just a boy, that he had those, he had the privilege of being born a boy. He wasn't raised to be al-Qawwam. So he becomes a terrible leader. Terrible. Absolutely ridiculous in his leadership in marriage. Because he doesn't know how to lead. He's got no emotional intelligence. He's got no emotional skills. He's got no knowledge, no real depth to his knowledge. So it's like dealing with, it's like having to be submissive to a 10-year-old fool who has no education. All he does is yell and scream and jump up and down and slap himself when things don't go his way. All he can do is hurl vile language at someone when things don't go their way. That's what you're dealing with, because he wasn't raised to be al-Qawwam. He believes that everyone owes him due respect just because he's a man. I'm a husband now. I have the status of being a husband. You obey me whether you like it or not. Codependent women, when they're with men like this, they start to rebel. There will come a time when they'll start to rebel against this because it just gets a bit too much. It will get too much being treated like a slave. And that's when their relationships become very toxic. But until then, these Muslim men will use their wives as examples of what other men can get. These women exist, boys. Get yourself one of these women. She's submissive, she's obedient. This is a woman of Allah. This is a woman you want to marry. This is a high-value woman. A woman who says yes, sir, to every command, no matter how ridiculous, no matter how petty. She says yes, sir. You see? So that's one part of the codependent issue that Muslim women unintentionally contribute towards the red pill movement. The other type of codependent woman is the woman who gets involved in major sins with red pill men. Now, the women who gets involved in sins are codependent women now the first type of codependent woman I was talking about is the more religious one, okay? The God-fearing religious one who is, she's been raised in an Islamic environment, and she's got a very strong sense of what halal and haram is, even if it's in a very strict way. She knows what halal and haram is. She avoids the major sins. Those virgin women are the ones that narcissistic men see as kryptonite. Kryptonite is the virgin, codependent Muslim woman who's been raised by misogynistic Muslim men. Okay? Or red pill Muslim women. This is kryptonite. Perfect for a red pill Muslim man to have as a long-term partner. They will never be able to get the empath, so they settle for this. They settle for the long-term partner being the codependent. And I say settle because even the narcissist cannot stand to be with a codependent woman. And they can't stand it because they have no sense of worth. And they disrespect the codependent woman for putting up with all their rubbish, actually. That's a secret none of them will tell you. They actually disrespect codependent women for allowing them to treat them as housewives and doormats. They're like, well, this woman definitely has no sense of worth. And that's why you get the devaluation, and that's why you get discarded, and that's why you get brutally divorced, and they replace you in the blink of an eye with someone else. And the funny thing is, they usually replace you with someone who is the polar opposite. Someone who is a career woman. Someone who's into her studies or her business or whatever. Because I promise you one thing, even they don't like their understanding of Islam. Even they find it hard. Even they feel and know deep down that it's the wrong understanding of Islam that I am enforcing on other people. And they know this because of their self-loathing and self-hate that narcissists have for themselves. If they have the correct understanding of Islam, they'll no longer have that self-hate. But as long as the self-hate is still there, they know that they're not following the correct understanding of Islam. However, this understanding of Islam is getting them what they want in life, and it's giving them the authority that they want in life and the power that they want in life. Not understanding that they really are pathetic in how they believe or they want people to see their masculinity. It's toxic masculinity. They are not qawamun. They are not. And like I said, there will come a time when the codependent is no longer able to deal with someone like this. And then that's when you get the devaluation, the discard, the brutal divorce. You find that the red pill Muslim man will brutally divorce his wife out of nowhere one day because he's sick of her. He's sick of her actually putting up with him, and now he needs fresh meat. He needs something different now to entertain him. He's tired of having to live the same life for 10, 15 years where she is pretty much being his mother. I'm not going to go into this whole mother thing again. It's in my previous podcast about submissive wives. Please have a listen of that to understand what I'm talking about. But eventually he will get sick of having to deal with the same mother who's always happy to look after him, always happy for this and happy for that. So either he will discard her, or she'll start to kick up a fuss about not wanting to live this life anymore. She'll come across new people in her life, new friends, and they'll say to her, what are you doing? Why are you living this kind of life? Or she'll compare her life to other Muslim women who live a much happier, healthier life with their husbands and families. And she'll start to realise, actually, what am I doing to myself? What life am I living? She'll start to rebel here. Arguments will increase. And this is where it all goes downhill for the red pill Muslim man. And then he's on a mission to find another one, a quick replacement. Whether it's another challenge or a woman who's similar to her, but just different meat, different flavour. And like I said, he will find other narcissistic women to marry. They tend to avoid them because they know that these women are highly manipulative. They don't tend to trust other narcissistic red pill women because they know and they've seen their mothers, how they've taught their sisters how to manipulate other people and other men. Trust me, they've seen it. They know that these narc women are highly manipulative. But if a woman is more manipulative than a man, she'll be able to overcome him. But in general, narcissists don't like to target narcissists for long-term relationships. You'll find that these marriages don't last very long because there's They both fight for power in that relationship. Now, the other type of codependent woman is the liberal codependent woman. And the liberal codependent woman who is not religious, she is the one who will often fall into major sins with red pill Muslim men. And as long as there are women who are falling for the love bombing and they're falling for deceptions and manipulations of these men, because believe me, a lot of these men are very hypocritical. Very hypocritical. They'll lead double lives. They will show a religious facade, but behind closed doors they're committing zina and they have girlfriends and everything. So the Muslim women who get involved in that lifestyle with them, women who are okay to having sex with these men before marriage, who get manipulated into having sex before marriage. Now, I'm not saying it's a lot of it is unintentional. These are codependent women who are looking for love and looking for romance, and they're looking for relationships and they're struggling to get married. Maybe their fathers are making it difficult for them to get married. Maybe a suitable person hasn't come along and now they're running out of patience, and they enjoy being in the company of red pill Muslim men because these red pill Muslim men come across as very alpha. They're the gym rats, with the good bodies, and they usually, sometimes, not all the time, but they can be good looking. So codependent women find them exciting. They find these men exciting to mess around with. And even if they don't have the intention to mess around with them, a lot of these red pill Muslim men will use them, and they'll promise marriage, and they'll say, look, I'll marry you. He can't control his desires. Narcissists can never control their desires. That's why they're always so obsessed about sex. That's why they have to have 4 wives, because they have no control over their shahwa, over their desires. So you will find that they easily slip into zina. Even when they're married, they'll have affairs. They'll commit zina with other women. Even if it's not full on zina, they might have, relationships in which sexual acts are committed, and they'll still say it's not zina. Zina is only penetrative sex. I haven't fallen into the category of zina. This is just a mistake. It's just a sin. So they will even justify them being in sexual relationships with other women in which they don't go the full way, but there's still sexual activity. And they say to their wives, well, it's not zina. I'm not a zani. And they actually manage to brainwash their wives into believing that and forgiving them for that. So they can also justify them engaging in zina before marriage. And it's always the codependent women who fuel that. Unfortunately, they fall into it. Narcissistic women too. Again, narcissistic women don't have that sense of discipline. They will follow their desires, follow their shahwas. You'll find that they get involved in so many secret marriages. I met a woman who's been married 8 times. 8 times. And all 8 times, apart from the first time, were all secret marriages. Deals that she had, she's a client of mine, deals that she had, made with these red pill Muslim men for, to fulfill sexual needs only. So she'll get married to them with a very weird contract that I don't even believe is valid at all. But they get themselves involved in these kind of sexual activities with each other, and it fuels misogynistic red pill views of women. Women can't be trusted. Women are this, women are that. All women want is to be controlled, and women are desperate to get married because of their sexual desires. Now, they say that because these are the only women they're coming across. Again, they're not coming across empathic women. They don't have good examples of, true, clean-hearted, empathic Muslim women. They're coming across narcissistic Muslim women and highly codependent Muslim women who are okay with having a secret marriage just to have sexual desires fulfilled. And so these red pill Muslim men are looking at these women as halal hoes. Sorry for the expression, but this is what I'm hearing. And then they don't trust women. And then they have this tight leash on the women that they marry. So, and it's for that reason, because of what they engage in together, whether it's premarital or after marriage. They engage in very strange activities together in the name of Islam. They halalify it in their own way and justify it Islamically in their own way to get away with fulfilling their desires in the quickest and easiest way possible. So unfortunately, codependent women when they fall for men like this, and they fall for the love bombing and manipulations of men like this, and I wrote about it a lot in my book, a lot of these codependent women, they end up committing zina with narcissistic Muslim men who deceive them. They just want to use and abuse them. They promise them marriage, and like I said, they will use the excuse later that, oh, sorry, my family said no, my mother's not happy with you, or they don't want to start a marriage with a sin. I can't tell you how many clients I have who are still depressed 5 to 10 years later after having these relationships with these guys, because, it dawned on them that these Muslim men didn't protect them. I mean, look in Surah At-Tawbah, ayah 71, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتُ بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْضٍ يَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنكَرِ وَيُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَيُؤْتُونَ الزَّكَاةَ وَيُطِيعُونَ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ أُولَئِكَ سَيَرْحَمُهُمُ اللَّهُ إِنَّ اللَّهَ عَزِيزٌ حَكِيمٌ. The believing men and believing women are allies of one another. They help each other. They enjoin what is right and forbid what is wrong, and establish prayer and give zakah and obey Allah and His Messenger. Those people, Allah will have mercy upon them. Indeed, Allah is exalted in might and wise. Here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that Muslim men and women are brothers and sisters to each other. You don't exploit your sister and you don't exploit your brother. You don't push them into major sins. You're meant to be protectors. We're meant to protect and help each other from all of this carnage that we are facing in this life, right? But the key word in this ayah is al-mu'minuna wal-mu'minat. They are the only ones who actually care about each other. If you're not a mu'min, you're not going to care. And that is why narcissistic Muslims don't care about your well-being. They don't care about your health, your mental health. They don't care about your virginity. They don't care about all of that stuff. Because inside their hearts, they're not true believers. Because if they were true believers, they wouldn't get involved in any of that with other Muslim women. They wouldn't. Because it's only al-mu'minuna wal-mu'minat. Not Muslims. Not al-muslimuna wal-muslimat. Al-mu'minuna wal-mu'minat. So it only applies to those who are believers. You mess around with someone who's Muslim but he's not a believer in his heart, you best believe he's going to use and abuse you. You best believe that. And that's how you know someone is just a Muslim and not a mu'min. Please go back to my podcast about, the covert Muslim narcissists being the hypocrites that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about in the Quran. This is them. It's easy to say that I'm Muslim. It's easy to show that you're Muslim, but it's not easy to act upon Iman when you don't have it. If you are going around blowing that trumpet thinking you're better than everyone because everyone has fallen for the facade that you're some pious religious Muslim, whether you're a man or a woman, it means nothing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because you'll always be exposed for having no Iman or a severe lack of Iman. So be careful who you engage with. Be careful who you befriend. I'm talking to women and men here. Be careful who your friends are. Unfortunately, you won't know who the narcissist is until you have a very bad experience with that person. Stay away from people who have a very harsh understanding of Islam. Let them stick together. Don't socialize too much with them. Now, I'm not saying that everything that they say is wrong. It's not. Obviously, it's not. There's a lot that they say it's correct. It is correct. But unfortunately, a lot of people don't understand the full context of a specific ayah or a specific hadith. They don't understand the context of it. And their interpretation of it is wrong. Their interpretation of it doesn't resonate with the character of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Because if you really want to know the true understanding of Islam, of an ayah or a hadith, just ask yourself, would the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, does this match his character? Would he have said that? Would he have meant that? Knowing what he was like as a gentle, kind-hearted, loving, peaceful, beautiful person? Would he have said that? Would he have meant it in that way? No, he wouldn't have. And then when you say no to yourself, you know that, okay, that's not an understanding I want to follow. Use that as a measurement. Ask yourself, would the Prophet Muhammad have approved of this? Would he have meant it in this way? Would he have taught it in this way? Most often than not, you'll say no when it comes to dealing with red pill Muslim interpretations of the Quran and the Hadith. You'll find that very often. And, like I said before, it's a two-way thing. Red pill Muslim men cannot be red pill Muslim men without red pill Muslim women backing them up. Otherwise, we will have an entire nation of red pill Muslim men who are homosexual. I'm telling you, they'd be homosexual, because if they are fighting this battle on their own and women are not complying and women are not supporting them, the only supporters they will find will be the men. So if it's just the men and men together, guess what's going to happen? And actually, we're seeing a lot of that now. We're seeing a lot of these red pill Muslim men actually be closet gay. Again, another podcast for another day. A lot of these red pill poppers are closet gay because of a deep hatred in their hearts towards women, and narcissistic women in particular, narcissistic mothers in particular. So this is how women, like these categories of Muslim women, have fueled the red pill Muslim movement, unfortunately, and how our societies are going back to resemble those of pre-Islamic Arabia, in which men are treating women so badly, treating women like slaves, treating women like sexual objects to enjoy. They are having multiple wives out of desire rather than an ability to take care of multiple women. And that's, again, back in those days, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala set the Prophet Muhammad to change the polygamous system into one that was more charitable, rather than out of a man's desire to have multiple women, because a man's desire doesn't end. It doesn't end. You'll marry 4 and then you'll find another woman who's even more beautiful than all 4 wives combined, and he wants her. So if you are going to act out of your own desire, nothing will ever be enough for you. And that is how the red pill Muslim men of today are resembling the men of the times of Jahiliyyah. Because when you read the seerah of the Prophet Muhammad, and every Muslim needs to do this, every Muslim needs to read the biography of the Prophet Muhammad in order for you to understand the Quran properly. When you read it and you read about the characters of problematic, misogynistic men back in the times of the Prophet Muhammad, you will say to yourself, oh my goodness, that's like men today. We still have those men today in our societies, in our homes. That's my husband. You will say that to yourself and you'll think, oh my goodness, we haven't broken out of that. We haven't progressed. We're going backwards. And that's how again, that's more evidence that the understanding of Islam that they're following is the incorrect understanding of Islam. Because the character traits of the Prophet Muhammad and the character traits of those who are problematic are so different when you compare them to the people that you know today. If those character traits resonate, the problematic ones resonate with people that you know today, you know that they've taken the wrong understanding of Islam. You know that. Because when you study the seerah, the life story of the Prophet Muhammad, you will understand how he managed to deal with every situation and every hardship in his life and every blessing in his life, and how all men were meant to take him as a role model. Even women were meant to take him as a role model. But men even more so, because hum al-qawwamun. He was the perfect example of al-qawwam. And if a man has not, and I say it, has not taken the Prophet Muhammad as a role model in his entirety, not only can he not become a qawwam, a proper one, but he's also going against the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad. He is now actually resembling the characteristics of people like Abu Jahl. I've had misogynistic Muslim men on YouTube say to other men, if your wife is playing up, crack the whip, bruv. Crack that whip. Foot on neck, bruv. Discipline your wife, bruv. Women love to be disciplined. Women love to be controlled. There was a Sahabiya who approached the Prophet Muhammad and asked him for his opinion on two men who had proposed to her. One of them was Muawiyah and one of them was Abu Jaham. Not Abu Jahl, Abu Jaham. And she asked him for his opinion. And he said to her, don't marry any of them, either of them. Reject them both. She said, why? He said, as for Muawiyah, he's broke. He never has any money. He's lazy. He's not a hard worker. Forget that. And as for Abu Jaham, he walks around with a stick. And he's harsh with women. And he's harsh in his views of women. He said, stay away from him. He's not a good, he's not gentle with women. If the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ today heard the podcasts and the video clips of misogynistic Muslim men today who tell other men, crack the whip, control, do this and do that, he'd be horrified. I'm telling you, he'd be horrified. And he would tell every woman to stay away from men like that. He would tell every Muslim woman to stay away from men like that. Because a wonderful Muslim man is someone who is really gentle and loving towards women. And I'm not saying flirtatious. I'm not saying that he needs to be overly friendly. I'm talking about, like, he's got a love for caring for women. Like the way the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ did. He was very gentle with women. He was very, considerate and compassionate towards women because they were the more vulnerable species. But if a man is going to be harsh in that sense, then not only does it indicate he's around narcissistic women all the time, it also indicates that he's got harshness in his heart and he's got an iman problem. So this is how women fuel the pre-Islamic, toxic patriarchal societies in our modern world. I hope I've made it clear. Anyone who's got any questions, any comments, please drop them below. I'm happy to answer. I do offer one-to-one counselling and coaching for anyone who needs it. Please do grab a copy of the book if you haven't already. There's plenty in there about all of this. I go into the core elements of how, people are raised and become different types of Muslims. You'll find everything that you need to know about yourself in there. I promise you, all of it's in there, inshallah. And yeah, I hope you've enjoyed the podcast. I'm grateful that you've listened, if you have, until this point. And the next podcast, inshallah, will be about problematic male relatives, deadbeat male Muslim relatives who do not take care of their sisters and mothers and those under their care, and what to do about it if you're in that situation, if you're a woman in that situation and you have no supportive male relatives at all. So I'll leave it at that, and inshallah until the next podcast, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.